The actual school grew out of workshops like this, where at the end of the workshop, parents realized what a difference a conscious, aware person is in how they use their words and their language makes on a child. Either it opens up the learning or shuts it down. It makes people feel this is where they want to belong or they just want to leave, right? And the comment was, wouldn't it be fantastic if all the teachers were trained like this? In other words, those fantastic teachers we've all hopefully had at least a glimpse of sometime in our own schooling experience, that really made a difference to us and made who we were, like that spark ignited, as if someone saw us for who we really are, for the potential that we had, and made this learning environment come alive in whatever way it was. And it would always come back down to the quality of the person, not the subject that they're teaching. Something about that person. It wasn't about history, it wasn't about geography, it was something about that teacher that made that worthwhile. And how many careers out there are chosen because of the quality of our teachers, not actually the subject? So some children hated English, grew to love English because of a teacher, decided to follow English literature, but only because they felt good in that classroom. They were inspired because the teacher made that come alive, but it actually had nothing to do with what they really liked. It just had to do with what, there were 9 crap teachers, but 1 great one. So what distinguishes a good teacher from a great teacher is the great teacher has that ability, that spark. Now, often in this world, it is because of their own life experience, not because they were trained into being a great person. And that is really what Synergy grew out is what would it be like if a teacher consciously knew how to create that environment and that relationship with any child in his or her class, such that they got that result as literally it was a process, not just, well, I'm so lucky I've got a good teacher this year. Right? So that's how it kind of like emerged. Because in any school out there, you've got fantastic, what we would call Synergy teachers, even though they're not Synergy trained, right? Because they have it in them. But no one out there really, well, in my experience, knows how to create those people. It's just the luck of the draw. And then the schools will say, we've hired the right people. I'm saying hire the right people. We've got the potential, but let's now, really mold them, like create what we're wanting. We'll create them to be those kinds of people, because in my experience of parenting and teaching, that's all that's needed. The rest falls into place. The academics fall into place. The home environment falls into place. If those things are first firmly entrenched. So the quality of a school is going to be directly proportional to the quality of the relationships within that school. The quality of the relationships are going to be directly proportional to the quality of the communication within that relationship. The quality of that communication is going to depend on the quality of the awareness in that relationship. The quality of that awareness is also going to come back to your ability to, be present, to understand, to reflect, etc., etc. So it traces all the way back, and that's the primary drive of what Synergy was about, is seeing how we could create amazing environments and relationships, because based on that, the rest will just accelerate. It will flow. There's no point in having fantastic resources and fantastic curricula if your children don't want to be in school in the first place, or are so concerned that at break time so-and-so is going to come and steal their food or bully them. You think academic learning is going to really happen in that environment? No. So how can a teacher facilitate that relationship between those two children such that it actually works and there's a flow, and it allows for that child to actually then experience a different environment where learning is natural, because learning for human beings is a natural process. It's not that we have to learn how to learn as such. We're naturally curious, we naturally want to, and we just want to create and accelerate that, and especially in the realm of relationships, because relationships are the key to being human. We are social creatures, we search for socialness, and we just have no skills in that. So we need to support our children in learning how to be human and learn how to be in relationship with other people, so that this world actually doesn't become where it's going in many ways. And those are skill sets. So that's the one thing. Around the curricula, at some point, and for me, Synergy isn't about the emergent curriculum. You're going to have to say, if we really do respect children and respect that they're also participants in this thing called life, like there's that phrase, if you go and look at all schools, their mottos, their visions, we're going to support your child in preparing them for a great life, or preparing them to reach their full potential, etc., etc. I always wonder, well, what are they doing now if they're just preparing? When do they start their lives? At 18? we have to look that we're so disrespectful if we're thinking that right now they don't have a life, which means that childhood is just a passing phase from infancy to adulthood. This thing called childhood is just, it's a practice run. They're not really living yet. They only start living at 18. And as we were discussing last night, what happens is you get to 35 for most people, and then you have your midlife crisis. Why? Because you suddenly realize you aren't actually preparing to live your life anymore. You're smack bang in the middle of it. And that's a panic, because people suddenly realize they've spent the last 35 years preparing for something. Someday I'll be ready to do this. And no wonder you have a crisis, because you're suddenly like, oh my gosh, it's gone. 35 is gone. What am I going to do now? Now, I would like for that experience to be every day someone is present to, well, this is my life. This is it. So what can I do with it, and how do I want to make it work? So if we have that belief in education, we're going to have to look at this thing called curricula is basically a group of people who are coming to say to children, this is what we feel you need to know to become a good human being. And it reflects this attitude of you need to be good at maths and science and English, and that you need to learn. And somehow when you pass an exam, well, that's going to mean something. I don't know what that means yet, except that you've been able to give someone an answer that they were looking for, not that it shows what meaning you've created by what you've learned, etc., etc. And if that's the case, we're going to have to say to children at some point, so what do you want to learn about in this thing called your life? And that's the emergent curriculum, where it starts saying, what do you want to learn about? How does this want to work for you? And then, because we're still in a society that still pins to academics and national curricula, the job of this school at this moment is saying, that's what inspires children. That's what they want to learn. They want to know why the sky is blue. We walked on the way driving here, dropping Kaylin off at her grandma's. She says, how does a tree get from a seed into a big thing, a big tree? How does that happen? I mean, what a lovely question. Like, how does it? You think that there's this tiny little seed and it gets into this big tree. What happens there? You know? Now, why would we go and say, oh, listen, you can only learn that in grade 7? Sorry. At the moment, in your age, at age 5, you just need to know how to color in between the lines, please. So we'll cover that. Just hold on for another 6 years, because we cover that in biology in detail, right? At some point, we want to capture the imagination and leverage that, because that's a drive of learning which is really there. At the same time, because as I said, we're in a society where parents expect certain qualifications, universities still expect certain entrance requirements, our job is to pin how that curricula can still be achieved, but in the content that inspires children. So if the curricula says children need to be able to debate, they need to be able to calculate, they need to be able to write, well, we can do that still within the context of what is real and meaningful, as opposed to just textbooks on page 32. Meanwhile, the world out there is happening, and, well, that's too bad, because this textbook was printed in 2001, and that's what we have to do.